Welcome back to our New Testament reading videos. This week we're in Matthew chapters 21 to 25, and we're excited as we continue to work through the New Testament together. In Matthew chapter 21, we see Jesus ride into Jerusalem where he is declared as the king. And we know this marks the beginning of the last week of Jesus' life. But it was a pretty busy week, wasn't it? First, we see him after he's worshiped there go straight to the temple and cleanse the temple. Then he curses a fig tree after being worshipped some more. Third, he's challenged by religious leaders and he responds to those challenges. And then fourth, we see several teachings on various subjects for his disciples. Jesus did a lot during his final week before his crucifixion. But what unites all of those themes? Well, there's three things I would like to see. First, Matthew wants you to know that Jesus is king. That's really the main point of this entire book. Matthew has been saying it throughout the book, but he really declares it in Matthew chapter 21 when Jesus rides in on a donkey, fulfilling the prophecies from the Old Testament that the Messiah would come in on a donkey, a humble king, declaring himself as king. And Jesus is worshipped as king. Throughout these chapters, we see that he's king. First, he's the king of the temple as he goes in and he cleanses the place, saying, only I should be worshipped here. Second, he's the king over nature when he curses the fig tree, showing that he has power over nature. And third, he shows that he is the truthful king. He teaches throughout these chapters. And so Matthew wants you not to miss this point, that Jesus is the true king. Second, Matthew is trying to teach us that because Jesus is king, only he should be worshiped. That's what Jesus means when he goes into the temple and he finds them worshiping money and stuff. And he says, no, I'm going to cleanse this place. And he clears the place out. Second, that's what he means actually when he curses the fig tree, because it has leaves but no fruit. You see, it's a hypocritical tree. It's looking like it produces, but it doesn't really. And the point is to show that the religious leaders were doing the same thing. They claimed to follow God, but they didn't really have fruit. They were worshiping themselves. They were worshiping stuff. They were worshiping laws. But only Jesus is supposed to be worshiped. And then as he challenges these religious leaders, well, as they challenge him, and he responds, all of his responses are claiming that only he is God and only he should be worshiped. Matthew is wanting to show us in these chapters that there's a lot of hypocrisy in this world, even by the religious, but Jesus in the end should be the one who is claimed as king and worshiped as king. And then third, the theme in this chapter is that Jesus will be king in the future. Later in these chapters, in chapter 24 and 25, Jesus speaks a lot about the future. And in chapter 24, he warns that there's difficult days coming when people won't worship him and a lot of bad stuff is going to happen. But he follows that up in chapter 25 by saying that although it looks like evil is winning, he will return and he's going to judge the earth. So the point is that we should worship Jesus now because he's going to be the king in the future, just as he already is the king, and he will judge for eternity. So as you read these chapters, I want to encourage you to ask yourself, have I given Jesus everything as my king? That's what Matthew wants you to ask. Is there a part of your life that you haven't given Jesus? Have you not given him any part of your life? If that's true, it's time to cleanse your life just as Jesus cleansed the temple. Allow him to come in and push everything aside and worship Jesus as king, because he is king and he will be king for eternity. Join us next week as we continue reading and seeing this king go to a cross, die for sin, and rise again. We'll see you next week as we continue our New Testament reading plan. See you later, church.